Huge moves are coming for the Toronto Maple Leafs as Brad Treliving has made some shocking comments very recently as he revealed that the Leafs are not done this offseason and that big moves could be on the horizon. So I'm going to break that down in this episode and discuss what that can mean going forward for the Toronto Maple Leafs, as we didn't really expect these comments to come out from the GM just 4 weeks ahead of training camp. Stay tuned for all that, but before we do, we have a quick message from our sponsor, Fume. Are you trying to kick a bad habit to the curb? If so, you need to check out Fume. Have you heard that the flavored air category is quickly becoming the leading alternative to vaping and smoking? It's a whole new movement towards better habits led by the sponsor of today's video, Fume. Fume has a lot of delicious flavors to choose from crisp mint to cinnamon hearts. They have a flavor just for you. And with flavored air, you can satisfy your oral fixation through a passive diffusion system that utilizes no electronics, no vapor, and no combustion. And Fume has served over 300,000 customers, and you can be their next success story.
For a limited time, use our code DIGEST to get your free topper. It's the perfect accessory for your Fume device. Slip it onto the mouthpiece for a softer, warmer feel. It's great for those who love to fidget, and it's reusable. Head to tryfume.com. That's tryfum.com and use code DIGEST or scan the QR code on the screen right now to get your free Fume topper when you order your Journey pack today.
And thank you to Fume for sponsoring this one. Make sure to check them out. Some wild things to go over today as Brad Treliving made some comments and some at a very interesting time. We're obviously a few weeks away from training camp. The regular season is closing in every single day. And the biggest thing that we were wondering is Mitch Marner going to get traded? Is Nick Robertson going to get traded? Because it's been awfully quiet since they made those signings, and we have some news on that today. So let's just dive right into it. Leafs GM Brad Treliving, and we'll get into the exact comments because he had a lot more to say than just this. But he says the team is, quote, still isn't done yet, end quote, and will continue to look for ways to improve the roster despite training camp starting in just about a month. So, Darius, this is he's given us some, I'm not going to say false hope because he hasn't been proven wrong yet, but he says the team still isn't done. Now, I'll ask you what that means. We'll obviously go into our own thoughts on this, but it seems like him saying we're not set yet could mean a few different things, whether that's a Nick Robertson move, whether that's even a Mitch Marner move, or could be something as simple as Yanni Hakanpää, maybe just some of their prospects coming up, and maybe like Easton Cowan potentially making the opening day roster depending on how training camp goes. What is your take on this? It was interesting because he wasn't forced to say this. He didn't have to say this, but he gave some Leafs fans some hope that some more changes are on the horizon, even though I don't think it's going to be a huge shakeup to the core.
No, and I think I know what he's alluding to. I think it's Nick Robertson. That's kind of where I was going to go first. And like you mentioned off the top there, I think it's Nick Robertson that he's kind of talking about, because obviously what's going to happen with that? He's not signed, so he's not going to play for the Leafs as of right now. And are they going to trade him? I don't know. The player doesn't have leverage, right? So when you look at that situation, it's kind of weird. I wouldn't move off of him. I've been very vocal about it in the last couple of weeks. I would keep Nick Robertson, but again, he doesn't have a contract. What's going to happen with that? Are they going to end up trading him? And I have to give credit as well. James Tanner came out with an article just a couple of days ago, earlier this week, that said that the Leafs GM, Brad Treliving, his first big trade is on the horizon. He believes his first big trade is coming up before the season. So something to keep an eye on as well. I don't know what that looks like exactly. There's been a lot of rumors going around this week. Actually, it's been a big week for news, actually, league wide, which is pretty interesting in the middle of August, with some players wanting out of certain teams and stuff. So it could get pretty interesting with the Leafs and trade talks, because again, Robertson doesn't have a contract. Doesn't have much leverage. I wouldn't trade him, but you can't rule out a trade either, right? Because if the Leafs can improve in some way by moving off of Nick Robertson, then I think you do it. I just don't know if that's the case. So I think he's alluding to that. They're certainly not done yet. And you know, there's Hakanpää to talk about too, which we'll get to in a future video. So there's still a lot of moving pieces just a few weeks away from training camp.
Yeah, and it's very rare that you get a, not from an insider, but from the actual general manager itself. And yeah, there's going to be a lot of videos coming up on this. But we're going to discuss Marner and Robertson, and obviously we'll focus most of our focus on Nick Robertson. But let's get into the full quote by Brad Treliving. He said, "To me, we've still got 5 weeks or so till camp. And we're not set yet. We continue to look at ways to make our team better," Treliving responded. "I said at the end of the year, we're going to look at everything. Sometimes people fall in love with let's make a big change just to make a big change. At the end of the day, you can go out and make big changes. If they're not making your team better, to me, it doesn't make any sense to just make a change, just to stand up and say, look at it, we've made this big change." And Darius, this is actually very similar to what he said at the end of the season as well. He had a very similar press conference, if we remember. We covered it, rewinding back a couple of months ago after the Bruins Game 7 loss there. But this is interesting because it's almost like he is doubling down on the fact that a change is going to come, and it may not be a massive change in the sense, I think what he's referring to here is probably Mitch Marner. But maybe he's not going to make a change for the sake of making a change, but at the same time, he did come out and just say, we're not done yet, and that things are going to happen. You're hearing rumblings about trades. We'll break those down in future videos, but we're hearing rumblings in general about the Nick Robertson move, how it could be coming. Obviously, James Cook saying a trade could be on the horizon, his first big move. He hasn't made a big splash yet in the trade market, so this quote is very interesting to me. And it symbolizes that I like to think that maybe a Nick Robertson trade is more likely than we thought, even though I wouldn't mind keeping the player. I'm also not against trading him. Obviously, he only has 1 year left on his deal. He's going to need to get traded at some point if he wants to be traded. And he is one of the rare ones who requested a trade, whereas Mitch Marner did not. But he has of course, the no move clause. What do you take this quote? This is an interesting one. Very similar to what I said earlier.
Yeah, like you mentioned, it's almost exactly like he said when the season ended. And I loved it when he said it then. And I love it now because I don't think you should make a change for the sake of making a change. Obviously, during the summer, earlier in the summer months, we were talking about, Mitch Marner trade because there's a lot of rumors out there and a lot going around from different insiders and stuff like that. But you shouldn't make a change just to make a change, right? If that makes sense. Like, shouldn't go out there and make a humongous move just for the sake of doing it, right? If it doesn't make the team better. And to circle back to Nick Robertson, too, I mean, like you mentioned, he asked for a trade, right? So I wouldn't rule that out, but I don't think he's enough of a difference maker to say that you absolutely have to trade that player, right? Or should keep him, sorry. But yeah, it's going to be very interesting with Nick Robertson to keep an eye on. I think Mitch Marner, too, like beyond this season, that's the other thing that people aren't talking about too much. I wonder if, Treliving is hinting towards maybe moving away from Mitch Marner in way of just not re-signing him. I still think with Brendan Shanahan at the helm, I still think that, Mitch Marner will likely be a Toronto Maple Leaf even past this season. We don't know what that looks like past this season if Brendan Shanahan is even with the Leafs, but I think with him at the helm, I would bet that Mitch Marner will still be a Maple Leaf. I feel like they're going to try and extend him, but it's going to be, I don't know, it's going to be very interesting. There's a lot of distractions coming into training camp, and Brad Treliving is saying that, hey, we're not even done. Like the team isn't even done yet, right? We're still going to make a couple moves here, and Hawk and Paw too. That's another big wild card. So it's going to be fun. At least there's a lot going on before training camp. Last year I thought was a little quiet.
Yeah, we had about 2 weeks, early August, of late July, early August of it being really quiet. And now stuff is just picking up all across the board. And we look at Mitch Marner. He has the full no movement clause, so a trade there is unlikely. You can see this here. Things still feel weird, and tense around Marner in Toronto, which I tend to agree with, even if it's largely been the media and fans driving that narrative. And I tend to agree. They didn't announce that Marner's going to get the assistant captain. We don't know yet. I'm leaning towards the fact that he isn't. But as we all know, I'm not the biggest Mitch Marner fan. But at the same time, he is still a very good player, but things do seem a little bit weird. But at the same time, that makes tons of sense because he's been floated around in talks and all of those things. One person we haven't heard much about, as we keep talking about, is Nick Robertson, just from the training camp part. And it's going to be interesting to see, obviously, 27 points in 56 games. Ultimately, Darius, I think it's going to be an interesting thing. I don't think Mitch Marner is going to get moved yet. I think that if anything's going to happen with him, it might be later, either as we approach the season even closer or as the season progresses. But I think ultimately he's going to stay at Toronto Maple Leaf and they extend him some point after the upcoming season. But any final thoughts on this? I think Nick Robertson is going to be the guy that we're going to have to keep an eye on over the next 30 or so days. And ultimately, I think a move gets done for him, even if I don't really like it. I mean, he hasn't revoked his trade request, that is. So, I mean, he still wants to be gone.
Yeah, if I'm Nick Robertson, though, I would sign a contract because I saw it with Nylander just a couple years ago. You miss training camp, you miss half the season, and then your season is toast, right? You do put up like a couple goals here and there, but the rest of your season suffers because of it. So if I'm him, sign that contract. If you still want to get traded, see what that looks like, or just play it out with the Leafs and see what happens, right? I think signing a contract is the best way to go here instead of missing half the season or a full season until that, deadline in December. I think that's the way to go. And then on the other side of things, like you mentioned with Mitch Marner, another reason why it might feel a little awkward now is because Austin Matthews was named the captain. They're no longer equals like they were when they came into the league, right? This is Austin Matthews' team. He's the captain. What he says goes, right? And Tavares is going to be kind of that middleman there to facilitate things. He's now the assistant captain, right? So, whatever Matthews says goes kind of thing. Not in that way. Obviously, it's still team dynamic, but he is the captain. It's his team. So I feel like that could be another awkward thing for Mitch Marner this season dealing with that. But it's going to be interesting to see. I know the contract is going to be a distraction throughout the course of the year. It's going to be fun to follow, but I do wonder, I think first order of business, obviously for the Leafs, is Nick Robertson.
Yeah, let us know your thoughts on that. Do you think Nick Robertson is going to get traded? And do you want him to stay a Leaf? Let us know. Thank you guys for watching.